presence of the Lord is in this place. Oh, surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
Good evening, everyone. I stand here tonight wishing each and every one of you a happy, joyous, and Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your homes this evening on this sacred and glorious eve. What I truly love about Christmas is that it's a time when hearts seem to open wider. For so many, there is a conscious spiritual awakening to the love within us. And it's truly a time of transformation for all of humanity. Just look at some of the Christmas stories. One favorite is A Christmas Carol and the transformation that takes place in Scrooge when his bah humbug attitude miraculously changes. And who hasn't seen It's a Wonderful Life 100 times to watch Jimmy Stewart finally wake up to all of the blessings in his life? And of course, there is also the astonishing turnaround in The Grinch, whose heart grew 5 times bigger that Christmas Eve. You see, the true richness of Christmas is not something that can be seen or even wrapped up in a box, because it's all about the experience that happens within you. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, had a favorite Bible verse. Christ in you, your hope of glory. On this Christmas Eve, as it says in the Christmas Carol, Joy to the World, let every heart prepare him room. So tonight is your invitation to welcome in the Christ presence into the manger of your heart, so you may know and feel the love, the hope, and joy of Christmas. From the words of a small child, God bless us, everyone.
Well, thank you, Penny, for reminding us of some of the wonderful stories that we share around this Christmas time. Well, Christmas is tomorrow, and tonight there will be Christmas Eve services throughout the country, throughout the world, in every city and town, celebrating the birth of Jesus and the coming of God's special messenger of love and peace. And at the same time, kids young and old are all excited with expectation of Santa's arrival, with toys and goodies and wonderful presents all around. Now, have you ever wondered how these two very different customs have come to be combined and celebrated together at this time? And what about St. Nicholas? Is St. Nicholas and Santa really the same person? Or are they very different characters from very different times? Well, the answer to that question goes something like this. In the early 300s, Jews, Christians, pagans, Arabs, Greeks, and Roman citizens were all living in the same areas of Europe, Northern Africa, and Asia as fragments of the once mighty but deteriorating Roman Empire. They all had different beliefs, customs, and religions, and oftentimes there was conflict, especially in the outlying areas that were resisting Roman influence. Constantine was the emperor, and he was determined to once again unite the empire into its former greatness. Now, about this time, he had a dream of his army marching into battle with the Christian cross painted on their shields, and they won the day. So the very next day, before a great battle, he orders his men to paint the sign on their shields with white with the red Christian cross on them. And the army was victorious. He took that as a sign that he was to unite the empire under Christianity, and immediately issued a decree to stop the persecution of Christians, which was the practice at the time. Now, a little later, in 325 AD, he created the Council of Nicaea, where the Hebrew scriptures and texts and the Christian gospels and writings were formally put together to form the Bible as we know it today and create the religious foundation of the empire. But he didn't stop there. In a series of rather interesting and ingenious maneuverings, he took many of the pagan customs and holidays and combined them with Christian celebrations. So working with the Christians, Christmas was one of these. It comes from their Christ Mass, which was combined with the pagan holidays of the winter solstice and several Roman and Northern European harvest festivals. Well, pretty soon, Christmas was being celebrated throughout the empire with special foods, homes decorated with greenery, and gift giving. Now, in the late 300s, near Myra, which was a port on the Mediterranean Sea in present-day Turkey that served the busy sea lanes linking the ports of Egypt, Greece, and Rome, there lived a young man from a very wealthy merchant family, and his name was Nicholas. Now, his mother and father taught him to be generous to others, especially those in need. So Nicholas came to see that helping others really makes one's life much richer than it would perhaps normally be. As he grew into manhood, Nicholas became known throughout the area for his generosity. And when the Bishop of Marna died, one of the local clergy had a dream that they would be in prayer about the next bishop, and in through the door would walk the next bishop. Several days later, they were in prayer about the new bishop when Nicholas walked through the door, and he was unanimously elected bishop without ever seeking to be considered. Now, as bishop, Nicholas seemed more aware than ever of people's needs. He roamed all over the city, helping everyone in difficulty without asking for thanks, and his reputation as a holy man grew and grew, and stories of his generosity and kindness spread along the trade routes and throughout the Mediterranean. He was especially interested in that families had enough to eat and a good place to live, that children got ahead in life, and that the old people lived out their lives with dignity and with respect. Yet it was as a lover of children that he was best remembered. While he lived, he gave the little ones that he met small gifts, perhaps some candy or a small toy, and his kindness, which always managed to surprise them, touched their hearts, and they learned from this holy man what a beautiful thing giving really is. Now, sometimes, especially around Christmas, Nicholas would know of a person or a family in need and would give a generous gift without them ever knowing the giver, perhaps throwing it through a window or leaving it on a doorstep before slipping into the night. Well, on one particular occasion, an anxious father ran out and caught him and asked him simply why he gave them such an extravagant gift of gold that saved him and his family from bankruptcy and selling one of their children to pay their debts. Well, because you need it, Nicholas said. But why didn't you let us know who you were, the man said. Because it's good to give and have only God know about it, was his reply. The legend of St. Nicholas and giving around Christmas time spread throughout the empire and was the most popular festival of the year. However, during the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s, many Christians began to consider Christmas a pagan celebration because it included non-Christian and non-religious customs. During the 1600s, because of these feelings, Christmas was outlawed in England and in parts of the English colonies here in America. It was the Dutch who brought St. Nicholas to this country, and in early New England, the Dutch name Sinterklaas became intertwined with the Christmas festivities that the Europeans had brought with them. But St. Nicholas was always portrayed as a tall, thin, stately man who wore bishop's robes and rode a white horse, which seemed to fit the austere times of the Middle Ages. But all that began to change in 1822, when around Christmas time, Dr. Clement Clark Moore's 6-year-old daughter, Charity, was hospitalized with tuberculosis and not expected to live. Charity knew that she was very ill, and one evening when her father and the family gathered at her bedside, she looked at her dad and simply said, "Father, please make a special present for me at Christmas." He said, of course, honey. What would you like?" And she sighed and said, "Well, I don't know. I'm too tired to pick up toys. Maybe a story." Well, the Columbia University Bible professor, who was so learned in Greek and Hebrew, turned away and looked out the window to hide the tears that were beginning to well up in his eyes. And he saw some dry leaves whipping up in the wind, and a verse came to him. As dry leaves that before a wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. And he thought of his daughter and Christmas, and another verse came. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. Well, he knew then that he had a special story and poem for Charity. So he went home and he immersed himself in it, so much so that he forgot to buy the goose for the family Christmas dinner. And fearing that his goose would be cooked instead, he hitched up his fastest team, which was called Corsairs in that time, and struck out on a moonlit evening to get it. And during the ride, another verse came. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. Well, over the course of the next few days, he thought of his father's hired hand, who was a middle-aged Dutchman named Jan Deinchik. He was portly and had rosy cheeks, a big white beard. He smoked a stump of a pipe and wore a fur hat and fur boots. He drove a sleigh around the neighborhood during Christmas every year, giving out wood to those who couldn't afford it so that they could keep warm. And one of the customs in those days that they both practiced were to give out prunes to the poor little kids. And the prunes in those days were called sugar plums. And in those cold winter nights, everyone bundled up, and people washed out their one pair of stockings and hung them very carefully by the fire to dry that evening so that they'd be dry in the morning. Washington Irving was a well-known Dutch storyteller in that day, and he was a good friend of Dr. Moore's. And both of them were steeped in the Dutch traditions of the pioneers of those days. And he recalled the Christmas traditions in Holland of Sinterklaas and Black Peter on a barge with 8 goats handing out fruit to good little boys and girls and lumps of coal to those who had been naughty. Well, of course, you know the names of the goats: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Comet and Cupid, and so forth. Now, in those days, Everyone knew that when a Dutchman was perhaps in the wrong place at the wrong time and needed a speedy escape, he needed some special magic, perhaps to fit through a keyhole or out a window or perhaps up a chimney. And all he had to do was rub his nose, nod his head, and a clean escape was guaranteed. Well, the day finally came. It was Christmas Eve, and the family gathered at Charity's bedside. Dr. Moore took her hands, and he began to tell a story that went like this. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and he shouted and he called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Vixen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before a wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of little tiny hooves. As I drew in my hand and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his sack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head, and I knew in a moment I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, and turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him explain as he drove out of sight, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Well, such beauty from dire circumstances. The beauty that we find when we dig deep for meaning and for truth, to give as a gift out of love, or to give love and receive it as a gift. Charity looked at her father and said simply, "Thank you, Papa. That was perfect." She fell fast asleep, and day after day she grew stronger. She recovered fully in the days to come, and eventually had a family of her own. Now, Dr. Moore never intended the poem for publication, but word spread. One of his neighbors wrote it down and sent it to the papers, and it became legend, being reprinted several papers throughout the country and year after year. The Dutch Sinterklaas for St. Nicholas became the English translation Santa Claus. Thomas Nast characterized this jolly, portly, and rosy-cheeked image of Santa in cartoons in a publication called Harper's Weekly at the time. Coca-Cola created their own image for advertising their drink, and we have Santa pretty much as he appears today. This is our American heritage and culture. It's who we are and where we came from. It's our point of reference, our symbols that touch eternal truths. It's our story. And almost all of these stories are born in difficult circumstances. And each time we discover our hero or our heroine, the person who sees beyond the difficulty. It's all so clear in hindsight, yet sometimes so difficult in the moment. It's what spiritual growth is all about. It's not about getting so spiritual that all your troubles disappear. It's about using your spiritual truth to walk through every trouble that you have. Now, you might not be able to change the world, but you can change yourself. You can create a higher understanding, a deeper faith, a greater love, and draw others to you, as we've seen in these stories this evening. We want to close this Christmas Eve service with a special song for our friends at Unity of the Oaks. Merry Christmas and God bless.
In the sky remind us of man's compassion. Let us love till we die, and God bless us, everyone. In your heart there's a light as bright as a star in heaven. Let it shine through the night, and God bless us, everyone.
Till each child is fed,
Till all men are free, till the world becomes a family. Star by star up above, and kindness by human kindness, light this world with your love, and God bless us, everyone. Let the stars in the sky remind us of God's compassion. Let us love till we die, and God bless us, everyone. God bless us, everyone.